Hello and welcome back to the Don't Be Boring podcast, episode 6 today. As always, my name is Hezekiah,
And my name is Tyler Andrews.
and welcome back, world. Today, we're going to jump right back into it. Last week's episode, talking with JJ Peller on motivation, got me and Tyler definitely very excited about different projects and different things to come. So oftentimes with a lot of motivation, it is easy to become sidetracked. It is easy to become um, to kind of lose focus on what your end goal is, right? A lot of times when we have a lot of energy or a lot of passion on something, we can get caught up in the moment. And while living in the moment is very important, the focus on today's episode that we want to kind of dig into is goal setting. Trying to figure out what that end point is, um, how to fuel and how to channel that motivation we talked about last week into a kind of central point or into a ending goal. But one of the things I want to start off with, Tyler, is just asking you a question of um, yourself with as many different interests and as many different passions as you have. How do you, as somebody with a lot going on in your professional life, how do you kind of organize and prioritize your goals?
Mm, that's a good one. I'm going to start with being completely honest in the fact that I think that is actually one of the biggest areas that I want to grow and develop. Actually, we had our staff meeting. We had a staff meeting yesterday, and well, the short answer to this is I write everything down. So, case in point, we had our staff meeting yesterday, and I write out. I divide up a sheet of paper into my notes, my to-do list, my presentation points, and then general leasing updates for them all. And I just added a new category that was skills I want to grow upon. And actually, prioritization was the top of that list. So I prioritize prioritizing. Um, but I think the biggest thing that I do on trying to tackle all of that is I've gotten into the habit of writing down everything that I do or want to do or need to do. Just because it forces me, taking action to write down to pause and to actually formulate what I'm wanting to do or doing into words on paper helps me to actually think about those things. It's a really good way to take all the thoughts and the processes going on and then focus it. And from there, I try and try and figure out what's top of mind. Um, my mind works in a million different ways, and I'll start down the road on at least two or three projects at the same time. And I've gotten myself into the habit of at certain periods, whether it's a 15 minutes or like an hour or 2 hours, I set time increments where I'm going to just do a hard stop and say, okay, this is where I started, here's where I am now, where do I need to reroute? Just because I like following that along with all of that, and by forcing myself to stop, reconsider, and write it all down. That's something that works for me. Um, so
Very cool.
yeah. So
Very cool.
I have a question back to you. It's kind of similar to that. One I think one of the biggest differences between my role and yours is you are very you lead you lead more people. Your role is very very people oriented. You are a people leader. So not only are you creating your own goals, but you're creating goals for a group. And that's a very different thing. It's very easy to control like an individual. How do you create goals for a group?
I think that's a wonderful question, and that's one that I get asked by peers and training new leaders is one of the hardest ones to set. Um, like you called out, it's very easy to set, and well, I won't even say it's very easy. It's one thing to set and control your own goals. You know your motivation level, you know your passion, and you know you're interested in what you're trying to do. Regardless of who you're setting the goals for, one of the most important things when setting goals with a group is being transparent. It's communication. It's those foundational building blocks of kind of any relationship, you have to get the team bought in. Um, it doesn't matter how, bought in you are to that goal. If it doesn't make sense, or if it's, not impactful for the team, why are they going to be bought into the idea? So the first thing that I like to do when setting a goal is include the team. Um, I try and take pieces from their ideas, feedback from them, to help shape it, to make sure that it is both realistic, and engaging. Those are two things that we often, sometimes lose sight of when setting high goals for ourselves. And I'll be my own worst critic, and there are a lot of times where I'll put the cart ahead of the horse, and I will try and get, in front of myself as far as setting goals, because I think I can take on so much. When setting goals with a team, it's really important, to make sure that, one, they are bought in, they understand what we're trying to do, and then also just that they are bought into the steps that it will actually take. Um, that's one thing that, I very early on as a leader had to learn. It's easy to make a goal, but you can't forget the forest for the trees, right? Like, you have to remember each individual step that it takes, to make that plan to actually get from point A to point B. Because there's 1,000 small decisions that make up that one big decision at the end. Um, so just making sure that you are capable of the many small commitments it will take, to get to where you need
So
to
I
be.
think as you're talking about that, I think what you've told me just in what I've heard you talk about just over time. You guys talk. What's your big measurable? You guys have a big metric that you're always going for. What's it called?
So we have a lot of them, but they kind of wrap up into like, what we call a KPI, or like key performance index, or key
Okay,
performance indicators. So like our TPH or our UPH are our big ones of, kind of your overall shipped volume divided by the number of hours it takes you to do it. So your transactions, your units per hour is our biggest
got it.
metric.
So how do you? So those are good examples of like measurable goals, and like I, I think that, and we can talk about measurable goals are better than um, quantifiable goals are better than qualifiable goals. It's reality. Well,
Yes.
I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
Hopefully, the podcast
I got
listeners know
you.
what I'm trying to
Yep.
say.
Yep.
Um, do you have an example where you have had something that wasn't a as measurable of a goal that you had to convince your team to get on board with? I don't know. This is kind of a general question. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a really good question, and because, like you said, you often, when you're setting a goal, you want it to be what's
Hmm.
called SMART, right? You want it to be, I think it's sustainable, measurable, realistic, attainable, and timely, or something like that. Maybe I misspelled the word.
Yeah. Yeah. Specific, measurable. I just googled it. I'm always on Google. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound.
Oh, close. So you want to,
That was
with
good for off
with
the cuff. That was good.
thanks, man. I've done this for a couple years. Um, but yeah, you want to make sure it has all those things, right? It needs to be measurable so you can determine how successful you're being. It needs to be timely so that you can get it done and kind of move to the next thing. But, you want to have an understanding of where you're going, where you're going to get, how long it's going to take you, and kind of all the factors playing into it. But sometimes, like you called out, there are some things that are a lot more difficult to track, or some things you can't put a number to. One example of something that I've had to do with that is like changing the culture.
Hmm.
So like one of the things when I first started at Chewy that I had to really work on was changing the culture of the team. And that's an extremely difficult thing to track or to measure, but it's, for lack of a better phrase, is tangible. You know what I mean? It's you can feel it. You can feel it when you walk into the room. You could measure it in the number of highs that the team says as you walk by, or the lower number of incidents, or there are measures you can take from it, but oftentimes when setting goals that are hard to track like that, and the results are relatively arbitrary,
Yeah.
um, as far as there's no specific numbers to track. Those are ones where it's even more important to involve kind of the team and the whys behind what you're doing. So for me, like when I was trying to really focus on changing the culture, you just have to day in and day out hit home on that value or that idea. So of like, hey, this is who we are, this is what we care about. And if you ask me tomorrow, I will say the same
Mm.
thing. And if I ask you in 2 weeks, I expect you to know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right? So it's building that foundation of this is who we are and this is what we care about, and then it's driving that home relentlessly and squashing anything that is kind of contradictory to that. Not to be you know, authoritarian or anything like that, but just because those are the foundations that we agreed
Mm.
upon, right? And that's why it's so important that you build the plan with the team, because if, hey, this is what we all said we wanted to do, and you're just like you and I often do of, hey, did you go to the gym today? Or, hey, when are we going to record this podcast? It's, hey, this is what we said we wanted to do. Now we need to do
I
it.
like that.
But yeah, so I mean, it's the, you want your goals to be tangible or to be trackable, but they are not always. And so
So,
it's even more important in those goals to be able to understand why you're doing what
and
your
as we
goal is.
talked about it, I kind of came up with a better way to describe it, because I think that
Oh,
everybody
do.
has the smart goal concept, and the reason why is, as you said, foundations. The smart goals create a foundation that everybody can get on board with. So where I was trying to define a difference is, there are directly measurable goals and there are indirectly measurable goals. Your directly measurables are your easy to quantify, your KPIs. You've got the hours, you've got the tasks. Your indirectly measurable, because you're still able to measure, the number of highs that are being done, the overall sense of excitement that's in the air. There's but those are it's the difference of a direct and indirect yet still measurable goal, and I think that foundation is really important because everybody can understand it.
Definitely. That kind of brings me to another question that I have for you, kind of talking off goals. Um, Bridging more into personal, like what's an example of like one goal that you set for yourself recently that you were able to accomplish? I know for me, like I'm going to be a terrible example of this. Like I keep setting the goal that I want to read more books, and I keep not reading more books. So like, what's one example, either something that maybe we've talked about on the podcast or we haven't, but what's one goal you set recently that you were able to kind of accomplish or you have made traction
Yeah.
on?
So one of the big ones, has to do with me moving to Pittsburgh, where I didn't know anybody, and yet still being a social creature, social animal. Like, don't deprive me of my addiction of socializing. So like one of my biggest goals, and it was 100% like a mental health thing. Like, I need to be around people, outside of my usual 9 to 5. So like I set the goal that I wanted to meet new people, just plain and simple, and I wanted to do it pretty much right away. So I'm gonna start with a really easy one. I literally 3 days after I moved to Pittsburgh, uh, I'm sorry, 5 days after I moved to Pittsburgh, I signed up.
Close enough.
I signed up and joined the Pittsburgh Young Professionals Organization. I went to an event at the Wiggle Whiskey Distillery, which is a local Pittsburgh favorite, a week in. And at that first event, I got connected with the social committee chair of the Pittsburgh Young Professionals, and I'm officially on the Pittsburgh Young Professionals Social Committee. And I actually have an interview in the next 2 weeks to be the social committee
Nice.
chair. So, like, I don't know, the progression for me was, I gotta meet people. So that's one. Like, I set the goal of meeting people, and I went to Google right away to find out what are the trackable ways that I can do this. And I guess my time measurement on that was just stat. Yeah.
That's excellent. And I think one of the congrats on the interview for the chair spot. I think from my experience with you as a social chair, I think you'll do an excellent
Thanks, man.
job. But um, yeah, definitely. But one of the things I think that you called out, I think is really important. Of you set your goal, and then you set it. You one did something. You looked up what you needed to do, but you put yourself in the right situation. You set up your time. You went to those meetings, and you kind of joined the group. But you put yourself in the situation where you could accomplish your goal. And a lot of times when we set goals for ourselves, we forget who we are. You know what I mean? Or we forget our strengths or our weaknesses in those moments. And so it's really important when setting goals, not only to make sure they're realistic and all of that, but when actually enacting out your goals, like set your time up when you'll be successful. Put yourself in the situation where you can actually accomplish that goal. Like for me, my goal was to read 15 minutes before I went to bed every night. And then I get into bed every night and I'm like, I either want to talk with my wife or I want to fall asleep. So this is not a time where I will be good at reading one of the two books that I have started to read by my bedside table. I need to build that time in either when I wake up in the morning, when I have a ton of energy and the day is starting, on a lunch break or whatever it may be. But you also, like, part of reality of knowing yourself and building your goals is, when you build your plans, really think about those steps that you're going to take, and make sure that you're putting the actual putting yourself in the situations where you'll actually be successful, and not just making a goal that you'll fail at. Because like anything in life, like failing at a goal that you set, because you put yourself in a situation where you don't think you're going to be successful, is just as disappointing.
Oh, 100%. Well, and so as you're kind of talking about that, like, so I'm realizing we probably should have just started this entire podcast with going over SMART goals, because like if people have never, like, we're talking about literally every aspect of it. So if you've never heard of SMART goals, welcome to the game. This is game changing. But I think that this so really comes into the A, which is the achievable aspect, because you and I are both very competitive people. We want, as soon as we have that goal, it's like, well, what the hell? Why didn't I accomplish that yesterday? So I think the important part of the achievable aspect is giving yourself a buffer. And I don't think that people, I don't think I am very good at giving myself a buffer. And I just want to encourage people, and remind myself to listen to this podcast in like a day, to give yourself a buffer as you're setting goals, because unfortunately we're all human. There are going to be, other things that are going to come up that are going to just make us, change our mind, interruptions, you know, life happens. I think that's the most important part of Achievable, is the fact that you need to keep in mind that life happens. So, um, and I and that also brings up, I want to drop this dime, which I want to talk about this later on. Um, my Professor Kalish, who's the head of the art department at Wabash College, and also my advisor. He really changed my life. And I don't think that he realizes that. I don't know if he's actually going to listen to this podcast, but I just want to give him a shout out. Thank you for that. Because my senior showcase, I actually almost did not. I almost did not graduate with an art degree. And because he kind of at the beginning of the final semester was like, "Listen, you're behind. You're not going to be ready. You don't have enough stuff to put forth." This had come in where I had not set, smart goals. I had not set good, attainable projects. I was trying to do way too many things. It was senior year. I was a double major. I was like, I'm going to get through all this stuff and be awesome in fraternity life. Great. Um, so he really helped reshape for me, how to get back on track, and then also taught me about myself. So my actual senior showcase, which I did finish, my topic was the balance between chaos and control. So in an artistic form, that came out where I built intentional three-dimensional structures, and then poured over them with plaster, which starts off in a fluid form, so therefore it looks completely uncontrolled. Uh, but I think that it's important that people balance their goals with a chaos versus control factor. Um, you know, create your goals with that control in mind, with what you want the end result to be, and be prepared for the beauty of the chaos. There is beauty in chaos. And I think that's something that people should. I don't think enough people really accept that, to sometimes accept the chaos and plan for it. So that's my thing. So coming back to you for a question, how do you, in your, whether it's work life, you pick how to answer this one, how do you prepare for chaos?
I think that's really I think that's really interesting, and I think that's a good kind of step into it because, like you said, it's kind of like looking at SMART goals in general and just saying like you have to make sure it's realistic and like do all of this planning, but like there are going to be certain unplanned aspects, certain things that'll come up in life, or an operation if you're talking about work, whatever it may be. There will be variables that come up that you can't control. And I think being comfortable with that is very important. Just knowing that, hey, like for me during a work day, as much as you hope there will never be one, hey, if we have a safety incident, here's what's going to happen, right? So, or if at home, hey, if I have a long day at work, here's how I'm still going to get that reading time in. Whatever it may be, you come up with an exit plan, right? Or an emergency plan for, hey, I ran into this, or if I run into this problem, which I've either had in the past, or if something comes in the way of this, here's how we're still going to get this done. So like for us right now, hey, if we're going to record the podcast every Sunday, but Hezekiah gets sick on Sunday, then we'll record it on a Wednesday, or we'll record it on a Tuesday, or you know what I mean, whatever it may be. Just building in um, a relative emergency plan, or a understanding of there may be something that comes up that I can't control. If it does, here's how I'm going to work around that. But I think one of the bigger things, and we kind of talked about this on, God, I want to say it was episode 3, about the importance of being flexible. Maybe it was actually episode 1. Yeah, episode 1, the importance of being flexible and the importance of being willing to change. So I think while the end scope of your goal should be the same, like the rocks you have to hop on to get there, or rocks you have to hop on to get across the pond, can change. You may start going one way and then, oh no, lava flood, or tidal wave comes through and knocks some of them out the way. Whatever it may be, be comfortable hopping on a different foot. You know what I mean? Figuring out, all right, my metric is no longer relevant, or whatever it may be, and try and figure out how you're going to kind of adapt and overcome. So I think that flexibility is also important with the how you get to your goal. You want to obviously keep your goal as consistent as possible so that you're not changing too much on either yourself or the people around you. But as far as how you get there, I think that's relatively relative to um, success in the end. You know
So
what I
that
mean?
kind of that brings me to, so it sounds a lot like it's relevant to the first, which is the S is specific. And I have a question. So specific is written as goals should be simplistically written and clearly define what you're going to do. Now, my frame of thought would be to say you should be specific and leave yourself the opportunity for it to change. Kind of like how we've kind of jumped into these podcasts, kind of saying, let's do it, let's see what happens. How important do you think it is? How important do you think the specificity of your goal is in the overall scheme of the goal setter?
So that's again, a really good question. And my gut reaction, um, which again, I'm going to step back to work here, is just, for me, the why will always be more important than the
Mm,
how. Always, 100%, every time, every day. The why is more important than the how. You know, people always say Rome wasn't built in a day, but we don't often talk about like how Rome was built, early construction methods, whatever you want to talk about. But like the 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 how we do something doesn't matter. You know what I mean? As long as you get to point A to point B, how you do it doesn't really matter. It can be ugly, it can be pretty, but the why is always important. The why is what truly either brings people together or separates them. It's what, you know what I mean? It's the glue. So if you get your why down pack, the how or the specifics of how you actually get to where you're trying to go, to me it doesn't matter as much. So when I talk about goals, when I talk about these things, like identify where you're going and why you want to get there. Once you have that scope, get there. You know what I mean? Once you understand why it's important for you to get there, you will inherently listen to episode 5 of the Don't Be Boring podcast and become motivated towards it. But you will, if you know why you're doing something, you're intrinsically more motivated to actually do it, and you're better understanding of what steps you need to take than if you were to say, I want to be a millionaire. You know what I mean? All right, bet like money would be cool. But if you say, I want to be a millionaire because I want to take the money, or like not even I want to be a millionaire, but I want money so that I can donate it to charity, so that I have the ability to take care of my family, so that I can do X, Y, and Z. Okay, to do that, I need to be a millionaire. Okay, to become a millionaire, and then you build your scope, your plan, but you have your why, you have your vision, your manifesto, your crest, your code, your credo, whatever you want to call it. But it's truly really, like, I can't say it enough that like why do you want to set your goal is arguably more important than
I like that.
whatever you're trying
Yeah.
to do.
Good answer.
Thanks, bro. Good question. Um, so kind of sliding in towards a wrap up. My last question to you, and kind of bringing out my challenge for the week. My challenge for the week would be, at a high level in the comments down below. I would love to see what everyone's challenge is, or what everyone's goal is. What's one thing that you are working on right now that we as a peer group, we as a collective, can help hold you accountable to? And I'm not saying I'll be as aggressive as myself and Tyler calling each other, telling each other to go to the gym, or whatever our goals are. But how can we help? You know what I mean? What's one goal you're working on right now, that somebody checking in on would add value to? For me right now, that's reading more books. I really enjoy reading. I don't do it enough. You've heard me make fun of myself like 5 times in this podcast. So my challenge for the week, other than commenting down below what your goals are, is remind me to read a book.
I like that. All right, so um, I'm surprised I didn't actually have a on the spot challenge, but I'm going to force myself to do it. So my challenge for our listeners for this week is to actually, I am one. I know of SMART goals. I talk about SMART goals, and yet I often don't actually, implement them to a T. So my challenge is to just take the time to look up what SMART goals are. Just read up on what each of the definitions is, because at a 30,000 foot view, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. It's pretty easy to understand, but it's not as easy to implement on a regular daily basis. So my challenge is find a way, find the time to teach yourself SMART goals and implement them in your next big project that you have, either personal life or work life. That's my thing.
Very cool. Well, right on. Thank you again for listening. Make sure to drop a like and a share if you enjoyed it. Comment down below what things you'd like to hear coming up. We have a couple of topics that we're looking to cover over the next couple weeks, but we really do enjoy hearing back from the fans on what things you guys like to hear and would like to hear coming up.
And the other thing is, best be on your toes because we're gonna be doing some more interviews in the next couple weeks too, trying to get some get some insight as to how you live your life to not be boring. So heads up.
Right on. We'll keep an eye out for that. And as always,
Don't be boring.